Paschal lamb. And that tradition is in this very, very old text from the Hebrew Bible, Exodus chapter 12. And it takes place even before the Israelites, have the Exodus, which doesn't happen until another 3 chapters. So the Lord says to Moses, this month shall mark for you the beginning of months, meaning the Jewish New Year, which for the last couple of thousand years, we start in the fall with holidays like Rosh Hashanah. We see in the Bible, it's really in the spring, beginning of the year, and to speak to the whole community of Israel, yada, yada. On the 10th of the month, get ready. And on the 14th of the month, I want you to sacrifice this, or slaughter, I should say, slaughter a goat, okay? It could be a sheep or a goat. Now, I just used a slip of the tongue. I said sacrifice. And one of the things I'm going to be saying very, very clearly is there is nowhere in this text an idea of sacrifice. That is to say, the priestly terminology of sacrifice is nowhere to be found. And in fact, everything we know about priestly rites from the book of Leviticus does not comport with this text. This text is older, it's more ancient, and it's more fundamental in a very, very essential way. We know that for a couple of reasons. First of all, the word is slaughter, right? It's not sacrifice. In Hebrew, the word for sacrifice that's used throughout the Bible is korban, which is translated as the thing through which one draws near to God, right? Or the thing through which we induce God to draw near to us, right? So that somebody offering in the book of Leviticus a sacrifice hopes to do that in a religious sense. I'm worshiping. I want to get God to listen to my prayers, or I want to feel close to God. I do the sacrifice, and it can be a bushel of wheat, it can be a turtle dove, you know what I mean? But it can be almost anything that you have at your disposal that's, kosher, alive or grain. But this business here, a lamb or a goat, doesn't happen at an altar. As you're reading this text here, this happens in somebody's backyard. There's no altar, there's no temple, right? Who shall do the slaughtering? It doesn't say a priest, right? And the particular rites that you do when you're doing sacrifice in the Bible, which is, you take a little bit of the blood, which is an expiatory business, and you throw it a little bit over here and on the altar, and it renders you clean, or however it gets too involved for me right now to explain the whole Levitical system. But trust me, you don't see any of that here. You do have a ritual that we never see later than this year in Egypt, all those thousands of years ago, which is the business about taking the blood and putting it on the doorpost and the lintel. Now, in the Bible, the word Passover is represented by this word, Pesach, right? And if you speak most any European language, you know that the way Europeans in Romance languages say Easter, they say Pascha or Pascha or Pasqua, right? It's the same, it's rooted in the same Hebrew word. And we make a mistake when we think that word means Passover. This is a drum roll moment, so get ready to tell your grandchildren about this. It doesn't mean anything about passing over, right? We have this idea, again, from the Holy Maxwell House Haggadah and all the paintings in the world, that there's an angel of death, right? And the angel of death, flies over the Israelite homes that have done this ritual and strikes the firstborn of the Egyptian homes as God's final demonstration of power before God takes the Israelites out of Egypt. But we don't have that in the Bible. There's no angel in the Bible. If you read the biblical account carefully, and you can read this at home, God releases God's destructive power all at once around midnight. And it all happens at once. And anybody who's inside one of these homes where the ritual has been done is protected. And that's what the word Pesach really means. It is a protection ritual to ward off ward off danger. In this particular case, it's to ward off the danger of God's destructive power, that through which God will redeem the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. Why is it, right, that this becomes formative in Christian ritual? Has a lot to do with the fact that Jesus was crucified around the time of Passover. So that in the spring, right, all of his original circle, right, the people we call apostles or the first disciples, or however you want to imagine them, they saw great significance symbolically and actually in the life and actions of Jesus during that fateful spring in which he was arrested by the Romans and condemned to die, right? So that in this class, we're not going to take up the famous question, for example, is the Last Supper a Passover? Right? The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, see things a little bit differently than the Gospel of John does. Interesting, but not relevant for tonight, because what they share is more important. Those things are that it happened around Passover, right? And that what he did becomes formative in Christian ritual and theology. They all agree about that. So let's take a look. I took them in the order of, I learned that Mark is earlier, but I did Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because that's the canonical order that Christians follow. So we're looking at this text here. On the first day of unleavened bread, right? So it's calling it Chag HaMatzot. It doesn't call it Chag HaPesach here, right? Where will you have as prefer you eat the Passover? It already knows them as together, that these rituals, just like in the Hebrew Bible, they go together. He says, go to the city, say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house, right? So we know that this is time for Passover, and presumably what are they're going to get to do? What we should not say is, they're going to have Seder, right? And the reason that I say that, and it'll become clearer next week, is that the idea of a Seder